Whoa! Stop jorking your peanuts for a second and look! It's the most disturbing and disgusting compilations of videos you've ever seen. Sus Month has finally come to an end, and another stain has been successfully placed upon this year. And thanks to you guys, this month's incredible interactions have led to this channel's first YouTube plaque. Anyways, I'd put headphones in if I were you, because if anyone hears you watching this, you're probably gonna go to jail. As a man of culture, Halo has been one of my strongest gaming loves, and that love runs deep. So deep that something disturbing surfaced from the depths 2 years ago, and every year since, this phenomenon left a rugged stain on the Halo community, and they know it as... Is Noble 6 breedable? Did Master Chief finger what would happen if you shoved a bunch of strings? How many hot dogs can fit? If you pooped in a grunt's breathing, I'm gonna start a prank channel and poop on other chairs. Did the arbiter help me? What a sexy help me!
Another June where I just look at my phone and shake my head and then turn off fucking clear the app. Take that shit to Crontex.
Did the Gravemind violate Cortana? Now, if you played Halo 2, you'll know that at the end, Master Chief was forced to leave Cortana with the Gravemind. But did he do anything inappropriate? Well, as a matter of fact, he did. For the entire duration of the end of Halo 2 towards the end of Halo 3, the Gravemind attempted to extract her files and was even able to touch Cortana. She fought against the Gravemind's Riz as he used Stockholm Syndrome to try to convince her that he should take over all life and she should allow it. But the real question is, if you were the Gravemind in this situation, what exactly would you have done to Halo 4 Cortana? Are Flame Atronachs breedable? Now, if you played the Elder Scrolls games, you'll know about Flame Atronachs. And you may have thought to yourself, I think I want to put my log in that file. Well, without taking the right precautions, you'll be peeling off your willy like the burnt layer of a marshmallow. But by using magic potions, rings, or spells, you can have immunity to fire, which can make breeding quite pleasurable. But is it still possible to reproduce? Well, quite surprisingly, it is. Flame Atronachs possess a material known as fire salts, which, if mixed with other ingredients, can create another Flame Atronach. And if you were to mix your own DNA, you would have a child with materials from both parties, which concludes that Flame Atronachs are indeed breedable. But the real question is, if you didn't possess any flame-resistant items, would you still use your hose to douse that fire? What would happen if you shoved needler ammo in your booty hole? Now, if you played Halo, you'll know about the needler. And you may have seen these long crystals and thought, I wonder what would happen if I shoved this up my... Well, considering how sharp these Subanese crystals are, unless you're into this sort of thing, you won't have a very pleasant time due to the unavoidable shredding of the entire walls of your anus. And even if you did somehow enjoy this part, you almost certainly wouldn't enjoy the next. After a period of time, these crystals eventually combust, launching high-velocity pieces of shrapnel, and if you're too overambitious, putting multiple crystals together could cause an explosion overload that will literally blow your whole back out. But the real question is, if you shove these crystals up in the front, does that mean that you popped your cherry? Could you use armor lock as a pull-out method? Now, if you played Halo Reach, then you'll know about armor lock. And you probably had many questions like, would armor lock still work with my wiener out? And if it did, would it conceal my nut? Or maybe even trap me in a frozen state where I'm busting until the armor lock? Well, one thing that we can assume is that all pieces of armor have to be connected in order to be fully armor locked. But if it did somehow still work, it most likely wouldn't envelop your staff, especially if it was firmly gripped by another layer of flesh, which means that this method most likely wouldn't work. But the real question is, would you still risk getting pregnant by the guy from Fortnite? Did a human ever get raw dogged by an elite? Now, if you played Halo, you'll know about elites, and I'm sure you've naturally wondered, has anyone ever let this sexy reptile smash? And surprisingly, someone may have. In Halo 5, you can find an audio recording of an elite confessing his love for Sarah Palmer, and though one would assume that this led to nothing further, a comment in Halo Infinite reinforces the possibility. In one of the propaganda towers, a grunt asks if Sarah Palmer and that elite were still in a relationship, which concludes that if true, Sarah Palmer was indeed the first human to be pumped by an elite. But the real question is, are you more jealous that that reptile was in Palmer, or that the reptile wasn't in you. I don't want Vinny to get to my loved ones. No, you don't. You don't.
Vinny will get you deep down where you got an itch you didn't even know about.
You better stay away from my brother Vinny unless you want to get your sucked so hard.
Suck the skin off you. Oh my god.
Oh, Vinny! What, my brother Vinny, what is he doing? No. Oh, Vinny, what did you do to him? Are Argonians breedable? Now, if you play the Elder Scrolls games, you'll know about Argonians. And you may have looked at them and thought, I wonder if I could handle that filthy lizard. Well, considering how scaly and naturally hard their skin is, it could be assumed that breeding wouldn't be quite pleasurable. But they do indeed have softer areas that make for more pleasurable contact. And if you think that you couldn't, history has shown that humans can and have had tickle time with Argonians. While playing Skyrim, you can stumble upon multiple volumes of a book called The Lusty Argonian Maid, which depicts a very spicy love story of an Argonian and her master, which concludes that although reproduction is not possible, it would indeed be pleasurable to breed. But the real question is, would you still smash the lizard at the risk of upsetting Dagoth Earth?
Kill Argonians. Behead Argonians. Roundhouse kick a Argonian into the concrete. Slam dunk a Argonian baby into the trash can. Crucify filthy Argonians. Defecate in a Argonian's food. Launch Argonians into the sun. Stir fry Argonians in a wok. Toss Argonians into active volcanoes.
Here are sad Halo moments, but they have inappropriate names. Emil takes it from the back. Cat gives some mean head. Master Chief gets dominated by Atriox. The Gravemind violates Cortana. Guilty Spark shoots all over Johnson's chest. Miranda gets her back blown out. Scarab gets rammed by Carter. George blows a huge load. Noble 6 gets penetrated by multiple elites. Master Chief meets up with an 8-year-old. Wait, it's too No, but seriously, Cortana is like literally 8 years old in this scene. Are jackals breedable? Now, if you played Halo, you'll know about jackals, and you may have looked at them and thought, I wonder if I could have relations with that prehistoric dino bird. Well, interestingly enough, they were most likely thinking the same thing about you. You see, jackals don't even believe in the Great Journey and are only in the Covenant ranks for the opportunity to kill, pillage, and plunder. And being that they are pirates, that means that they most likely partake in sexual assault. But the real question is having relations with a jackal considered interspecies, or just straight up bestiality? Could you bust a nut with an Elder Scrolls spell? Now, if you played the Elder Scrolls games, you'll know about magic. And with all types of capabilities, you most likely wondered if you could cast a little magic down to your skin staff. Well, considering that in the games there are no capabilities to do this, one would assume that it is impossible. But in order to answer this question properly, we need to imagine the actual possibility regardless of the game's accessibility. There are many illusion spells that, when cast on others, will make them more cooperative, submissive, and even captivated. And if you were to create your own custom spell like in Oblivion, you could max out the output of sexual drive or even self-infatuation and cast until you bust. But the real question is, would you also invest your gold into a spell that'll clean your underwear? Are brutes breedable? Now, if you played Halo, you'll know about brutes, and you probably looked at them and thought, I bet that dirty monkey's got a big old dick. Well, reproduction with a brute as a human would be impossible, which means the only question would be how pleasurable breeding could be. And unfortunately for most, it wouldn't be. Brutes are incredibly savage and very unintelligent, and the possibility of swooning or even arousing one would probably lead to your balls getting ripped off. And the men are most likely indistinguishable from the women, so if you did somehow succeed, you may be getting raw dogged by a big old monkey, in which case it would probably hurt less to shove a whole baseball bat in your anus. But the real question is, will you be able to resist when Tartarus throws it back?
This brute's throwing that ass back in a circle.
Is having sex with the Flood considered a gangbang? Now, we've already covered that the Flood could be breedable, but what if you did somehow riz up the Gravemind? Would you be considered in a polyamorous relationship, or is it truly monogamous? Well, considering that the Flood is just a single collective mind, one would assume that it would be monogamous. But we have seen that even after being enveloped by the Flood, individuals' consciousness still remains and also retains their memories while suffering from the parasite. And considering that there are multiple bodies involved in this cesspool, one would argue that it is considered an orgy. But honestly, it's really hard to think when you're getting pumped by 15 rotting corpses. Are the Illuminates breedable? Now, if you played Helldivers, you know about the Illuminates. And you probably thought to yourself, I wonder if this dirty squid could telepathically jork my peen. Well, considering that the Illuminate are quite fleshy, one could assume that breeding would be quite pleasurable. But what about reproduction? Well, surprisingly, it could be very possible. You see, variants of the Illuminate known as the Voteless are simply captured humans turned into the Illuminate pawns. And considering the possibility that these Voteless may have the same organ structure, there's a decent chance you could have a child with them. But the real question is, would you still take the plunge at the risk of being discovered by a Democratic officer? Are Flame Atronachs breedable? Can armor lock be used as a pull-out method? Are the Illuminate breedable? I have asked many odd questions this month, and if you're new to the shenanigans, you're probably terrifyingly asking yourself why. Well, let me tell you about a little something called Sus Month. It all started 2 years ago when Halo released a gay pride emblem and nameplate for Pride Month, and I asked myself in that moment, what does sexual orientation have to do with a first-person shooter about killing aliens? And with the same amount of reason offered to me, I created Sus Month, answering the most outrageously sexual questions ever asked in Halo every single day. I didn't expect it to have such an impact, but soon people were spamming other creators' inboxes, their chats, and their comment section with the most outrageous questions I've ever seen. The very next year, I was begged to do it again, so I did, and I included other franchises other than Halo, which made it even bigger, furthering the stain of my plague upon the platform. And here we are again. But last year, I was more subtle, but not this year. I'm telling you now, go ask any creator that you want the most outrageous questions that you want answered. On the days of this month, you have every right to know. Just go! What are you still doing here? Just go! Could you shove an energy sword in your booty hole? Now, if you played Halo, you'll know about the energy sword, and you probably saw this bumpy, rigid hilt and thought, I think I'm gonna shove this way up inside my butt, Morty. Well, if you're into this sort of thing, it could be quite pleasurable. But are there any dangers? Well, considering that there is a possibility that it could ignite inside of you, this makes it very dangerous. So in order to prevent any anal mishaps, the best thing to do would be to slash the energy sword until it's completely out of charge, so that any ignition in the sphincter will be impossible. But the real question is, how many of these things could you shove inside your Is Doom Guy breedable? Now, if you played Doom, you'll know about the Doom Guy, and you probably saw his big old muscles and thought, I wonder if this guy could spread me open. Well, unsurprisingly, he just might. Doom Guy is biologically immortal and incredibly strong, so if you did convince him to smash, he literally probably would. But if you did survive, what about reproduction? Well, there is a picture of a wife and child that can be found in Doom Eternal that was confirmed to be his family. So he indeed was breedable at the time, and only through practice could you find out if he could reproduce. But the real question is, would you let the Doomslayer slay that Could you use a hologram to avoid paying child support? Now, if you played Halo Reach, then you know about the hologram. And if you've been digging around in a hole without your gloves, you may realize you don't want to deal with the mess. So, if you were to use the hologram, you could escape this burden. Although holograms eventually disappear, if you were to tweak the armor ability for it to last longer, this could work for long periods of time. You see, women talk a lot and almost would never notice that they were literally talking to a brick wall. In fact, she would probably believe that the relationship between the two of you was never better because you were such a good listener. And once the hologram does disappear, you could gaslight everyone into thinking you died, which confirms that you could avoid paying child support. But the real question is, would it work if you made a hologram of yourself so you could give yourself back shots? Is it undemocratic for a Helldiver to jork it? Now, we all know as Helldivers, the fight for freedom and liberty is a constant and ongoing battle. But what about the battle inside? Well, one could argue that wasting time jorking it while Helldivers are dying against the Illuminate is undemocratic. But eating and sleeping isn't undemocratic. What's another 30 seconds? Well, breeding could be sanctioned through CO1 forms, relieving yourself of this urge. But one could argue that wasting time to relieve urges or even putting another Helldiver on maternity leave for your own pleasures is undemocratic. If thoughts of sexual tension are preventing a pure democratic mentality, then perhaps leaving yourself from these traitorous hormones for a few seconds isn't so bad. But the real question is, how could anyone think that it's undemocratic to spread the seeds of freedom? Oh, sweet liberty, I'm gonna bust! Could you use Halo multiplayer as birth control? Now, if you played Halo, you'll know about the multiplayer. But what you might not have known was that since Halo 4, multiplayer has been considered canon. The reason this is because every single multiplayer match is a group of Spartans fighting in a war game simulation on the Infinity. And this means one important thing. You can't get anyone pregnant in a simulation. This means no more trying to use an energy shield as a condom, no more using armor lock as a pullout method, and more importantly, no more using holograms to avoid paying child support. You can raw dog a Spartan all day, baby free. Does Super Earth have breeding programs? Now, if you played Helldivers, you'll know the sheer strength of Super Earth is the number of men and women fighting for freedom. We went from 8 billion people to an estimate of around 70 billion in about 200 years. But how is this many people possible? One may think that many CO1 forms were filled and many brave Helldivers and other people of Super Earth had many children. But this growth is so exponential, it could only have but one explanation. It is incredibly likely that Super Earth formed a breeding program selecting millions of only the most patriotic men and women with incredibly strong genes, and having these brave men and women strictly as breeders to aid growing and developing the strongest militia in the entire universe. Which makes sense because every Helldiver is a patriotic powerhouse of the strongest democratic genes! Yeah! Could a stealth boy conceal yourself jorking it? Now, if you played Fallout, you'll know about the stealth boy, and you may have used it and thought to yourself, I wonder if I could straight pound my meat without anyone being the wiser. Well, if you could spank it quietly, it would be really difficult for anyone to see you and you could get away with it. The only issue is, stealth boys and stealth suits have an invisible field around you that bend light, making you disappear within it. And although your peenar would be hidden, if you were to shoot out past this field, your nut would not be concealed, meaning blowing your load could mean blowing your cover. But the real question is, since the side effects of overusing this leads to schizophrenia, would you be comfortable jorking it in front of your imaginary friend? Could a grunt suck an engineer's butthole for air? Now, if you played Halo, you'll know about grunts and engineers. But what you might not have known was that grunts actually breathe methane gas, which is why they wear those large backpacks. And conveniently, engineers also use methane gas to levitate, so one would assume that it would be possible for a grunt to breathe the cut cheese. And surprisingly, this has already happened. You see, in one of my lore stories that I've covered, there is a real canon story of a grunt and an engineer getting stranded out in space. And because the grunt was running out of methane, the engineer offered what was essentially his butthole for him to be able to breathe, which concludes that it is possible for a grunt to smoke booty juice. But the real question is, since our own feces has traces of methane as well, would you let a grunt suck on your butthole? Are Daedra breedable? Now, if you play the Elder Scrolls games, you'll know about the Daedra, and you probably saw those caked up statues and thought, I think I'd crawl through hell just to crawl up that pussy. Well, interestingly enough, you weren't the only one who thought this. There is speculation from multiple references that Daedric Princes could conceive children from mortal lovers and may already have. So, if you were to have the same amount of max level Riz, there is a possibility that you could get with these immortals. And considering that reproduction is possible, and that pleasure is definitely a factor, this concludes that they are indeed breedable. But the real question is, would you really let Moloch Ball fill your guts to his Moloch Ball? Could you secretly bust using a Shroud screen? Now, if you played Halo Infinite, you'll know about the Shroud screen, and you probably used it and thought to yourself, I wonder if I could bust a nut without anybody finding out. Well, as convenient as it is to have a large area unseen by the naked eye, a huge downside is that you can't see out of it, making you very unprepared for uninvited guests. And another downside is that this Shroud only lasts about 8 seconds, making it almost impossible to bust secretly unless you're a professional jorker or just very talented. But the real question is, does sticking your wiener out of the other end make it a glory hole? Could Helldivers use stims to increase their jorking speed? Now, if you played Helldivers, you'll know about stims, and you'll have noticed that these stims heal wounds, fractures, and other injuries, but also give you unlimited stamina and health during the lasting times effect. And it begs the question, if you are using your CO1 permit for good use, or even jorking it, could you use it to speed things up? And the answer is most definitely and very effectively. But although your jorking or pumping speed and stamina would be dramatically increased, addiction to stims are very likely, and having a drug dependency isn't very democratic. But the real question is, would you still use the Stim pistol to shoot some jork juice into your penis? Are YouTube play buttons breedable? Now, if you watch YouTube, you'll know about play buttons. And you probably looked at them and thought, I think I really want to bust all over one of these. Well, in order to figure this out, I had to create this channel as an elaborate scheme to finally be able to bust all over Okay, that's enough. This is the last day of Sus Month, and because of you guys, I get to have the honor of having this plaque, and how fitting that Sus Month was the very month that we could get it. Thank you guys for your support, and thank you for enjoying another year of this month's crazy nonsense.
Hey guys, remember me from lore stories like a year ago? Well, this channel's gonna be getting back into it, so you don't have to worry about it.
Get out of here, you idiot! Or I'm gonna shove my energy sword in your butt. You're lucky it's not Sus Month